Welcome back to Heaven My Cake. I'm Eleonora, and today we're going to be making a garden flower pot cake. First, we're going to be rolling out the fondant, then we're going to cover the cake in fondant, and then we're going to be adding the beautiful marigolds onto the cake. Let's get started. The first thing I did was get me a box of Wilton fondant, and when it comes out of the box, it's a little stiff, so you do need to knead it. So you want to knead it until it's soft, and I also add some powdered sugar to my surface, or you can use cornstarch, and this just helps the fondant from sticking to the surface or onto your hands and onto itself. So here I am adding my colors. I did orange, red, and brown. And these colors made up that terracotta color, which is like the flower pot color. So you want to knead that into the fondant, and also add more powdered sugar if you need to, if you feel that your fondant is getting sticky, or if it's sticking to your hands like you'll see here, it's sticking a little bit. You just need to knead it some more. You want it to be soft and pliable, but still stiff enough to where it's not really loose. So once I was happy with that, I went ahead and started rolling out my fondant. So what you want to do is you want to put your fondant into the shape that you're going to be covering your cake in. So since my cake is going to be covered in a rectangle type of way, so instead of rolling it out in a circle like you saw earlier, I went ahead and shaped it into like a rectangle. So you want to make sure that there's fondant underneath, that there's powdered sugar underneath the fondant, on top of the fondant, on the rolling pin, and make sure that you rotate your fondant a little bit so that way it's not sticking to the surface. So you see me here just, putting my hand under it and all of that. Next, you want to measure your cake first, all around your cake, and then you want it to be the same length as it would when you cover the cake, which I'll show you a little bit more into the video. So here I am getting out those little air bubbles because you don't want those into the cake either. So you want to make sure that you take your X-Acto knife or like a small pin and pop that. And then I went ahead and using my fondant smoother to roll out to smooth the top of the fondant. There, I got another little bubble. So, like I said earlier, you do want to make sure that you're rolling out enough fondant that it's big enough or long enough to cover your cake. You always want to roll out a little bit extra. And there I'm taking my fondant cutter, or you can use just a pizza cutter, and just measure it out, cut where you need to cut. And you see where my fondant got a little stuck there. So you want to make sure that is all powdered sugar under there, and like move it around so that way it's not sticking to the surface. So here I'm doing my next measurement and just making sure I'm cutting where I need to cut. And the ruler can kind of put indentations into the fondant. So I make sure that I put my ruler on the other side. You'll see here. You see where I put it in the inside, and I move it into the outside so that way there's no indentations from the ruler. And then next I'll show you how I finished cutting my fondant. So once my fondant is ready, I make sure that my cake is crumb coated and chilled. And if you don't know how to do that, I'll have some tutorials in the description below. I'm adding some water to the side of my cake because this is what's going to help the fondant stick to the cake, acts like glue. So next I go ahead and wrap my fondant onto the rolling pin. And this just makes it easier to apply. You want to make sure you add some powdered sugar onto the rolling pin and on the fondant as well, so it doesn't stick onto the rolling pin and onto itself, because then you have to start all over again. So I'll carefully and neatly apply the fondant, roll it onto the cake, make sure that it's standing up straight, and smoothing it on there so that way I know that it is stuck to the cake. So here I just remove some of the excess fondant very carefully, gently, and neatly. And I'll take my fondant smoother and just go all around the cake, putting some powdered sugar on there too, just to make sure that it's not sticking. Just making sure that it's stuck onto the cake. So I'll go ahead and just remove some more of that excess fondant where that crease is at. And so I just continue doing that until I'm happy with it. This part can be kind of tricky to kind of, make sure that it's like blended together very well. I'm not selling this cake, so I didn't really work too hard on making sure that it looked perfect. So I just did the best I could. And then I take my fondant smoother and I kind of smooth that out because it's like Play-Doh. You kind of can blend it together and make it look like one piece. Then I start working at removing the excess fondant from the top of the cake. So I want to get as close to the top of the cake as I can using my X-Acto knife. So once my cake was covered in fondant, I start working on the top lip of the pot, like you see there in that picture. So you want to remeasure your cake because it is going to be bigger than what it was previously since you added that extra layer of fondant on there. So I go ahead and measure that, and remember to make it longer than what the measurement is, so that way you're not left with too little fondant, because then you would have to start all over again. And the one thing I did to make it easier on myself is that I did make it the same thickness as the ruler, and it went perfectly with the cake. All right, so then to apply that strip of fondant on the cake, I did the same process like I did when I covered the cake the first time. I go ahead and add some water to the sides of the cake, and then I go ahead and roll it onto my rolling pin. And then I start from where that crease is at. That's where you want to start adding it in, putting your fondant on the cake. And I use that little cake pan on top just so that way the fondant has something to kind of sit on or like lay on, because since it is a little soft, it can kind of bend. So just trying to get it on there as straight as I can and as neat as possible. So once I have that part pretty much covered, I go ahead and add some glue. I do cut the excess and then add some of the water, not the glue, add some water so that way that piece kind of sticks to the other piece. So to help it kind of sit a little straighter on there, I used my ruler and kind of went around the cake, just like lifting it up a little bit. You can see it's a little bit uneven, but it's okay. You won't really notice as much once we finish off the cake. So now finally we start working on adding the flowers onto the cake. I have my daughter there with me. She's helping me. We're actually making this cake for her father's birthday. So what I did was I took a straw. You can use bubble straws or just regular straws for this. And I just added it into the cake and I lifted it up, and where the part where the cake meets it, I just snapped that off. And I was able to push that into the cake so that way it wasn't really sticking up as much, but it's okay if it is sticking up. And then you just add the flowers into there. And always make sure that you're using flowers that are safe to be inside of a cake or that are edible, just to be on the safe side. And the florist will be able to tell you if you're using, a specific type of flowers. So my daughter's having fun here, just adding the flowers into there. So once we were happy with that, I went ahead and made some dirt ahead of time. And the dirt is literally just crushed up Oreo. So you want to crush it up as much as you can. And it really does look just like dirt. All right, and that's how I made this cake. Please subscribe to this channel. And please check out the description below for some tutorials on the tools that I used in this video. Thanks for watching.